Good morning and happy Sabbath to everybody here, and I'm happy and glad that I can share this message here in Schofield, because the message I have was I wanted to share here in this church. I didn't want to share it at Wenty, I wanted to share it here. So it has to do with an experience of mine, and I'll first ask a question: who has or has had conflicts in relationships? Whether it be your spouse, whether it be you with your parents, you and your children, whatever it is, your friends, all of us seem to have this thing called conflicts, and it can really get us down sometimes. Sometimes it's really hard to overcome and to get out of too. And not long ago, I had an experience with my own father, which is why it inspired me to do this message, because me and him had a conflict, and it was just recent, wasn't that long ago. When you plan a wedding, sometimes it can be really sort of make things tense if you don't do certain things. So it impressed me, and so I wanted to dwell on about honouring parents, about what it means to honour my father and my mother, and to try and grab some practical views that may help us in this area. So first of all, what is our duty as men and women according to the Bible? What is our duty? If you turn with me to Ecclesiastes chapter 12 and verse 13. Ecclesiastes 12:13, and we see there just what God has you to be. Let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Okay. Now I read there, let us hear the conclusion for the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. Two things, to fear God and to keep his commandments. And now today, with my topic, I want to dwell on one of those commandments. And also I'll point out what it actually means to fear God, because to fear God actually will help in us keeping his commandments. When we understand what it means to fear God, because I've heard it lately that people, they try and define what it means to fear God in the Bible, but the Bible itself defines what it means to fear God, and it's not what I hear. So later on we'll come to that point. So first we'll examine one of those commandments, and obviously you'll know which one it is, but let us read in Exodus 20. Exodus chapter 20 and verse 12 reads, Honour thy father and thy mother, that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. Here we see the first commandment that was given with a promise, that those who would honour their parents, that God would prolong their life on this earth, and also in its broader spectrum would give them eternal life. We give them life that would never end. In Patriarchs and Prophets, page 308, paragraph 2, it reads, Parents are entitled to a degree of love and respect which is due to no other person. So here you have parents, and they are to have respect that is due to no other person. There is to be a certain level of respect and honour that we are to give to them. God himself, who has placed upon them a responsibility for the souls committed to their charge, has ordained that during the early years of life, parents shall stand in the place of God to their children. When children are infants, they cannot comprehend God. And so it is just a physical thing that they cannot comprehend who God is. They can know that there is a God who exists, but they cannot comprehend who God is. And so God has ordained that parents should stand in his stead for those children. That parents would stand in God's stead, and that children would look to them as God. as someone who would instruct them in the right way to go. It continues, and he who rejects the rightful authority of his parents is rejecting the authority of God. So to reject your parents means to reject God, because God has ordained their purpose and their office. The fifth commandment requires children not only to yield respect, submission, and obedience to their parents, but also to give them love and tenderness and to lighten their cares, to guard their reputation, and to succor and comfort them in old age. Few points there. So it's not only just to do the things which they said, but it's actually to do those things which they don't say. You know, when it means to love someone and to care for that person, you know, that's coming from a heart that really loves, that wants to actually lighten the burden of someone else. And this was a real serious thing in ancient Israel. To honor your parents, God had instructed some serious penalties if you did not obey these commands. If you turn with me to Deuteronomy chapter 21, Deuteronomy 21 and verses 18 through to 21, we see here a command. Where is it? 21. If a man have a stubborn and rebellious son, which will not obey the voice of his father or the voice of his mother, and that when they have chastened him, will not hearken unto them, then shall his father and his mother lay hold on him, and bring him out unto the elders of his city, and unto the gate of his place. And they shall say unto the elders of his city, This our son is a stubborn and rebellious son. He will not obey our voice. He is a glutton and a drunkard. And all the men of his city shall stone him with stones, that he die. So shalt thou put evil away from among you, and all Israel shall hear and fear. A very serious matter, that if someone was to have a stubborn and rebellious child, that they would, when they just could not become bearable anymore, that they would show him to the elders to judge, and that child would be then stoned, would be put to death. That's how serious this command is. And it makes sense, because we cannot enter heaven if we break the 10 commandments. If we keep all the commandments except one, we will not make it to heaven. God requires that all the commandments be kept. And so to honor our parents is one of those things. But this command, even though it may sound and tends to sound like it's only for the youth, it is for every single person here. For young, old, middle-aged, didn't matter. It reads in Adventist Home 292 that this is the first commandment with promise. It is binding upon childhood and youth, upon the middle-aged, the aged. There is no period in life when children are excused from honouring their parents. So it does not matter whether you're a youth or middle-aged. We all have a responsibility not only to our parents, but this command also dwells on those who are ordained by God and have been given authority as ministers in our church and elders. They have been ordained by God, and so also they are included in this command to honour, to be honoured. And to keep this and to actually do this is of vital importance, like I mentioned. Life and death actually depends upon our relationship with our parents. Actually depends. Life and death actually depends upon that relationship, whether it be good or bad. It actually depends on it. And it's sad, in Adventist Home also reads, 293, many who profess to be Christians do not know what it means to honour thy father and thy mother, and consequently will know just a little what it means that thy days may be long upon the land which the Lord thy God giveth thee. There are very few people who profess Christianity who do not actually keep this commandment. And, I had to ask myself this because, I'll come to that point very soon with my experience. But, when you have a disagreement with your parents, it can be quite hard to come out of it, to think right, And, your own feelings come up, self comes up, and you have a hard time of getting that down, because you always want to be right. And but it's not always the case. Most of the time, it's not the case. And it's unfortunate that, the Bible has prophesied that in these last days we would have a problem with this. This area would be a problem in the last days. If you turn in 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 and 2. 2 Timothy chapter 3, verses 1 and 2, it reads, This know also, that in the last days perilous times shall come. For men shall be lovers of their own selves, covetous, boasters, proud, blasphemers, and here's the catch, disobedient to parents, unfaithful and unholy, and the list keeps going on, but I won't continue with that list. But in one of that list, it's read, disobedient to children. This would be a prevalent thing that is encouraged in today. In the day that we live in, we would see this more and more, and it would get worse and worse, and how true this prophecy has been fulfilled. How much we don't commend and honour our parents as I should, and how much you see it. You see the children are in most of the time in control of the parents sometimes. And it's a real shameful thing. And to counteract this prophecy, God was, in His mercy, is giving a message to counteract and to help and to restore the family. And that message was seen in our key text in Malachi chapter 4, verse 6. In Malachi 4:6, we see the message that God ordained should be given for today, in the time that we live in, that He would turn the heart, or the message would turn the heart of the fathers to the children, and the heart of the children to their fathers. This was a message that was to be given, and it's a message that I want to encourage, and I want to try and help us today in that we can fulfill that message, that our hearts can really be turned to our parents and have a better relationship with them. And so continue on now, there is a vital key to having a successful relationship in whichever way it is, whether it be with our parents or our spouse or whatever it is. There is one vital key that has to be implemented in order for a relationship to be successful. Does anyone know what that is? Can anyone think of what it is? Well, that's one, yeah, but more practical. Love. Thinking about something else? Sorry? I think I heard it. That's the one. Those other things are the vital keys, but this is one vital key that I wanted to dwell on today. Communication is one of the biggest reasons, one of the strongest reasons why relationships collapse in our day. One of the strongest is that people do not communicate with one another. Do not communicate each other's problems, do not communicate anything. They want to keep everything in. Or some want to keep everything in, and some just want to splurge everything and think they can do anything that they want because that's how they feel. But the problem does not lie when something provokes us or something causes us to be angry. If someone does something, that issue may have been wrong. That person might have actually done something wrong to us, and it might actually be legitimate. So you have a legitimate reason to be a little bit angry or a little bit frustrated. But the problem does not lie in that fact. The problem lies in what we do with that anger and frustration. The problem lies, or how to come through it, is how we able to channel that, say, those feelings that can become bad, that can become evil. Because when something is just held in and not dealt with properly, it just builds up, and you just can't handle it anymore, and you just get resentful, and then you starts to becoming evil thoughts instead of dealing with the problem and having a good result come out of it. And so in sharing my experience with my father, we were in the process of planning this wedding. We had, it was a process. It was to do with that. But anyway, the underlying problem was communication. At first, I tried to reach out to, or what I thought was trying to reach out to him, and I felt like I didn't get any response. And so I'd done it a couple of times, 2 or 3 times. Maybe I should have done it more, but it was a few times. Because the relationship that I already have with my father is not an easy one, because my situation is different to a few people, especially a lot here, is because my parents divorced when I was very young. I was only 4 when my parents divorced, so I only grew up with my mother. So my relationship with my father was already very estranged. I've only had one with him for the last 6 years. No, 5 years. An actual decent relationship. And so there's already a barrier there. It's a little bit hard for me to communicate with him, and I think the same with him to me. And anyway, we try to communicate. I tried to communicate with him the best I could, and just wasn't working. And I would go home and I would be frustrated, and I'd go and tell Nadine, this man is just not listening to me, doesn't want anything to do with what I'm saying, and I just don't want anything to do with, I'm not going to go to him with these plans anymore. I'm just frustrated, and that's it. I don't care about anything else anymore. And there would just be, I just fume, almost. And, and then for a while, and then I would feel that, and then after a while, he wanted to get these plans up, moving after a while, and so then he was getting frustrated with the same reasons that I got frustrated with him. He would go home to Nina, his partner, and go in his room and go, this boy doesn't want to listen to me, doesn't want to communicate with me, he just doesn't want to do anything, doesn't want to share anything with me. What's wrong with him? And here we have the catch, Here you have 2 evils. Both going in our separate rooms and having a war. But then when we see each other face to face, it's like nothing. It's like just neutral, just hi, how you going? And that's about it. Oh, that was hard. That was really, really hard. And that actually affected me health-wise too, believe it or not, because these things, when you want to come into emotional and spiritual things, and you don't want to deal with them properly, it actually will have a physical effect on your health. And I was actually getting sick because of this. I was actually getting sick. And something had to get done, And I was praying to God because I knew I wasn't so stubborn. Like, I would get frustrated, but then I knew what was right. I knew the commandment says, honor thy father and thy mother. And I'm thinking, okay, but I'm not doing that. So I need to get out of this because I'm not honoring him. And I was praying to the Lord and just asking, give me the opportunity, give me the strength. I don't just, words to do or say. And finally the time came. Finally, it just, to me, hit the Richter scale, and that was it. I called him up. He was at work. I was at home. It was my day off. I called him up. I said, we need to talk. I'm not sure if I even said hello. Got on the phone. I said, we need to talk when you get home. He's like, goes, yeah? I said, yeah, we need to talk. I said, do you think we need to sort some things out? He goes, yeah. I said, well, I'll do as well. So when you come home, try and come home a bit earlier. We're going to sit down and we're going to have a talk. And that was like, okay. That was a relief. Okay, now I'm going to hit this thing now. And even still, like, I was really, when that time came, just before that phone call, I really got on my knees and I broke down. I really just let it out loose. I was crying. I just was so emotional because I wanted to do the right thing. I was looking in Proverbs to see, okay, what am I supposed to do, And, and it's really hard. And in that frustration, in your mind, you get all this ammunition. You get all this ammunition. What are you going to say to prove that you're right? You've done this and this made me feel like this. And but I believe I earnestly prayed to God to help me. And when the time came, it worked out like nothing that I had planned in my mind. He came home and he was so cool about it. I thought we were going to have this, I was getting my shield ready. I was getting my sword ready. I was getting everything ready to fight. And then when the time came, I had nothing. I just had nothing, And I was looking, and when I looked through the Bible, all I saw was, how much I should really obey my Father, and that the things that I was getting angry with was not sufficient, because there's a difference. When something goes against, when he's talking against principle, then I have a stand to make. But when he's not talking against principle, I should obey. And I had to really come to that term. So, and he was having a couple of shots at me, and I had to resist. I had to not say anything. Now, I mentioned a few things, so you do have to say something, what was wrong, what was happening. But no, I had to, sort of just let it go. And so communication, a real key. That just showed how much we lacked in communication. And even when we had this discussion, I said, do you agree we have a communication problem? He's like, yeah, we have a communication problem. We have to start this. But this case of mine is a little bit extreme, because not everyone's case. But nonetheless, it does happen. Parents do get frustrated with their children, and children do get frustrated with their parents. It does happen, whether you're Christian or not. But God commanded that a responsibility about parents, that they should communicate with their children and what they should communicate to their children. And in Isaiah 38 verse 19 talks about fathers instructing their children. Isaiah 38 and verse 19 reads, the living, he shall praise thee, as I do this day. The father to the children shall make known thy truth. Parents have a responsibility to make known the truth of God, God's principles to their children. They have a responsibility to educate them, This was God's main educational system. At the moment, I'm doing the Daniel Bible College at the moment, the online Bible College. In one part, there was educational system. You had the heavenly education versus the pagan education, the universities. But what did God instruct for Israel's education system? What was it? In Deuteronomy 11, verse 18, Deuteronomy 11 and 18, verse through to 21, reads, therefore shall ye lay up these my words in your heart and in your soul, and bind them for a sign upon your hand, that they may be as frontlets between your eyes. So first of all, the responsibility is to the parents, that God's word and his principles would be imputed and just be ingrained into the parents' hearts and minds. And then they had a responsibility after that. And ye shall teach them to your children, speaking of them when thou sittest in thine house, and when thou walkest by the way, when thou liest down, and when thou risest up. And thou shalt write them upon the door posts of thine house and upon thy gates, that your days may be multiplied, and the days of your children, in the land which the Lord sware unto your fathers to give them, as the days of heaven upon the earth. This was the true education system that God instituted in Israel, and that was for the parents to teach their children wherever they were, to teach the children and to reach out to the children. Now, the point of this is that you must reach out to your children. Your children want instruction. They want to know what's right and what's wrong. Even though they might not seem like the case. They want instruction. When you give wisdom is always a jewel. It's always nice to receive. And also the children have the responsibility back. Children have the responsibility to hear the instruction of their parents. In Proverbs, In Proverbs 4:1. In Proverbs 4:1. It reads, "Hear ye children the instruction of a father, and attend to know understanding." If you want to know something, ask your parents. They really know a lot. Just because you don't always think so. Even with my own father, sometimes, since coming to the truth, I'm the only one in my family that's in this truth, and so I have a different knowledge now. I know things more now than my father because there is certain things that I know. But then there are certain things where in his life, it's just in him. And it's wisdom. It's actually good wisdom. And I should take heed, I should be able to distinguish and hear the instruction that he gives me. Because he gives me a lot of good instruction. Even just yesterday, he gave me some really good instruction. He's a real businessman, and so a lot of his instruction is about business and about, basically economy and things like that. He's proved successful, and he's passing that on to me, that same knowledge. And so I have a duty to listen to that. Why wouldn't I want to be successful? Why wouldn't you want to be successful? If you see a quality in things in your parents which are good, hear what they say, besides the fact that they're older and just have experience. And I do believe that if we can develop this relationship, it will really help us in our relationship with God. If we can so develop a relationship that we will be so comfortable just to ask our earthly parents of something, of an inquiry, of what to do, of a certain situation, then it will help us to be able to come to God and ask Him for His wisdom and cooperation as well. But a lot of a problem that we have a lot is that, or even myself, and I think many of us here, is that we think we know more than our parents. We think we know everything. And even though we can be correct sometimes, we can actually know something, and we actually might be correct. We actually know this certain thing we know actually better than what my parents do or what my children do. You might actually be correct, but most of the time, especially in relation to as a child to the parent, most of the time you can be wrong. You got to be very careful. And so the Bible talks about this experience about about rising up against your parents. When you think you're right, then you want to rise up and you want to be right. You want to push. You want to push the buttons and push the limits and prove something. Ends up being selfish because you want to prove yourself better. Depends how we go about it, and most of the time we have to be very careful that it's not a selfish spirit. But what happens when we want to rise up against our parents and have an argument with them? What will happen? In Proverbs 20, verse 20. Proverbs 20, verse 20 reads, "Whoso curseth his father or his mother, his lamp shall be put out in obscure darkness." And there's a reason for this. So whoso curseth his father and his mother, the light will be put out. He'll be put into darkness. Now, what is the reason that can cause us to curse our parents? What is the reason from the Bible? And now notice in the verse that we just read, when we curse our parents, that our lamp or understanding and reason will be taken away from us to actually understand truth. So what was the light put out of the wicked in the book of Job? We have in the book of Job a light that was put out from the wicked. Just to understand this verse a bit more and what causes us to go against our parents. So in Job 18, Job 18 verses 5 through till 8 reads, Yea, the light of the wicked shall be put out, and the spark of his fire shall not shine. The light shall be dark in his tabernacle, and his candle shall be put out with him. Now in this verse, here's the clue, or here's the answer. The steps of his strength shall be straightened, and his own counsel will cast him down. For he is cast into a net by his own feet, and he walketh upon a snare. In this verse here, the reason why the light was put out from the wicked was that he stood in his own counsel. He thought he knew or she knew what was the best thing. Instead of regarding what your parents think, or instead of regarding what God thinks and says, you stand in your own counsel, and that will be your fall. You have no leg to stand on. So we have to be very careful that we don't always trust in what we feel all the time, because a lot of the time what we feel is not always right. Just because I have an initial feeling, we must train our minds to understand and educate our minds what says God, what saith the Lord on this point. In Proverbs 14 verse 12, it gives a nice reading there about our own understanding. And sometimes we can think something is right, but what's the end thereof? In Proverbs 14 verse 12, So man lieth down and riseth. I'm in the wrong one, yep. There is a way which seemeth right unto a man, but the end thereof are the ways of death. Yeah, so something seems right to us, but the ends isn't the way to go. Now, sometimes parents are not always correct in their views of certain principles, as we see in ancient Israel, where God instructed every man is responsible for his own sin. Now, we have to be careful as children as well that we have to discipline, and we have to have our lives, make sure that our lives are really with God and that our education is really from the Bible, because our parents are not always right, or other elder people, because there are principles that my dad has that is not right. He thinks it's fine to work on Sabbath, but I know it's not right to work on Sabbath, because that's what God says. So you must educate yourself to know what is right and what is wrong, and that not everything that may come along in life is always right, and so we have to be able to distinguish it. In Jeremiah 9:14, it just mentions there about fathers teaching their children wrong ways, and what happened in ancient Israel, and to guard it. In 9:14 of Jeremiah reads, But have walked after the imagination of their own heart, and after Balaam, which their fathers taught them. We have to be careful also and be able to distinguish. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on this point, but there's a point to make of this anyway, is that we must so educate ourselves and be grounded in what is right and what is wrong. And as young people, we should make the Word of God our counsel and our manual. Even Abraham, as an example, he was in a heathen family. He was a child of God, he was a servant of God, and yet his family, his father was practicing, they were worshipping Jehovah, but they were starting to mingle heathenism, idolatrous actions in their family. So as an own individual, he had to distinguish what was right and what was wrong, and had to lead them. But in continuing on now, I want to move to a point about wisdom, because a lot of this has to do with wisdom, and I'll connect it. You'll see the connection a lot better when I go a bit further on about what it means, what wisdom has to do with our relationship with our parents, and with anyone older as well. But first of all, how precious is wisdom? How precious should wisdom be to us? If you go back to Job 28, Job 28 and verse 18 reads, "No mention shall be made of coral or of pearls, for the price of wisdom is above rubies." Wisdom is an amazing thing. Of all the things for Solomon to ask for, he asked for wisdom. Because it is our most astounding gift to have. And any youthful person can have this gift. Whether you're 12 years old, whether you're 8, and whether you're 32. Doesn't matter. All of us are children in God's sight, and all of us are children to someone, or have been. And so wisdom is a precious thing, and should be a precious thing. And what is the beginning of wisdom? Now I'm going to try and explain. In the first part of this study, I said that it was a duty for man to keep God's commandments and to fear God. So what is the beginning of wisdom? In Psalms 111, and verse 10 reads, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. A good understanding have all they that do his commandments. His praise endureth forever." So the beginning of wisdom, if you want to have wisdom, it starts by fearing God. And so now what does it mean to fear God? In Proverbs 16:6, we'll see one of them. There's two aspects of fearing God. In Proverbs 16 and verse 6, we see one of them. "By mercy and truth, iniquity is purged, and by the fear of the Lord, men depart from evil." So one aspect to fear God is to turn away from any evil thing. Is to not have anything to do with it anymore. As sinners, we have a relationship with sin and with different things that cause us to sin. And now God says, "I want you to fear me." And He actually promises that He will put His fear in you if we ask for it. But He says, now I want you to come away from it. I want you to depart from evil. And now the second thing is in Proverbs 8:13. Proverbs 8:13 reads, "The fear of the Lord is to hate evil." So two things. He wants us to come away from evil, to have nothing to do with it anymore. Then not only to have nothing to do with it anymore, but to hate that very thing. To hate the thing that we once enjoyed, which was evil. He wants us to hate the same things that He hates, because what He hates is evil. And so He wants us to hate evil as well. And anything that will cause evil. So two things. So what does it mean to fear God? To depart from evil, and to hate it. To turn away from it and to hate it. And it's interesting, that's such an important message, because in the first angel's message, what is it said there? To fear God and give glory to Him. Very important message. And it's a step process. But in continue on, so then now we talk about wisdom. So why is it so important for us as children? In Proverbs 2 verses 1 through till 6. Proverbs 2 1 through till 6. "My son, if thou wilt receive my words and hide my commandments with thee, so that thou incline thine ear unto wisdom and apply thine heart to understanding, yea, if thou criest after knowledge and liftest up thy voice for understanding, if thou seekest her as silver and searchest for her as for hid treasures, then shalt thou understand the fear of the Lord and find the knowledge of God. For the Lord giveth wisdom out of his mouth. Out of his mouth cometh knowledge and understanding. And a wise son, according to Solomon, he makes glad his father." Because a wise person will choose right instead of wrong. Because a wise person is someone who fears God. And someone who fears God does not want anything to do with evil things. Does not want anything to do that will cause harm. Or that will disrupt his relationship with his parents or her parents. Also in Proverbs it talks about he hears his father's instruction. Yeah, a wise son will hear what their parents have to say. Actually listen to what they have to say, because what they have to say is very relevant and is very useful in our own lives. Don't think that we know it all. Listen to what they have to say. Be encouraged by it. And when my father gives me instruction, I love it. It's just, we're all different. It's the kind of person that I am. I love hearing older people, what older people have to say, because I know it's always good. So for me, I take it all in, because I know that what they have to say is relevant and it's going to help me. Means I can go further than what my age actually is. I actually can be better off. And so I encourage other young people too. You have the choice and option to actually better yourself and be advanced, not for selfish purposes, not so that you can say that you're better than someone else. That's a wrong spirit. But just to actually have that knowledge, to know what is right and what is wrong, is a really wonderful thing. And so to be wise means just that, to know what is right and what is wrong, which is taught by our parents, but ultimately by God through His Word. It means to turn away from evil and to hate it. And this principle can be said also of turning away from evil companions who tend to influence us to do wrong as well. It can tend to anything when you apply that. We have evil influences out there, whether it be certain television programs, whether it be friends, be certain people that do not influence us in a good way. And so the Bible tells us, depart from that. In Proverbs 19 verse 26, Proverbs 19 and verse 26, and 27. It reads here a point. He that wasteth his father and chaseth away his mother is a son that causeth shame and bringeth reproach. And here's the verse here. Cease, my son, to hear the instruction that causeth to err from the words of knowledge. Cease to hear the instruction that is wrong, that you know is wrong, that causes you to err from the words of knowledge, from what you know is right, from what the Bible and what your parents have taught from the Bible, what they have said, what is right. These influences that you see that aren't influencing in the right way, depart from them. Don't have anything to do with them. So in concluding, we understand our duty as all of us, and as it was pointed out, that this message is not just for youthful people like myself and younger, but it's for middle-aged and for aged. It's for everybody here. And our duty toward God and toward our parents, especially, as we focused on today. And how essential, and I encourage everybody here to research more into communication and what it means to really communicate with your family, with your husbands, with your wives, with your children, and with your parents. It's a really great thing. When you understand what it means to communicate, it can help you so much. Most of the time, it will fix everything if you just learn how to communicate. And I myself am learning. I'm still learning. But I encourage everybody here to do the same thing, to learn what it means to communicate, and for each other, for parents to make your children feel comfortable to come to you. Because that's a key thing. They have to feel comfortable. And for children not to feel like your parents don't care. Your parents do care about you. They really love you. And they want the best for you. And so for you to actually go to them as well. So it's my prayer and wish that we may redeem the time that we may have lost. Yeah, we may have faltered with our parents or have done things with each other. But it's my prayer and wish now from today that we may redeem the time that we have, that God has preciously given to us, and that we may make things that may be wrong right, and that we make more determined effort to make our relationships more better and more successful, and for God to be glorified in them, and for Jesus to come now. Amen.